Welcome to Draft Rewind. This is Marty Shupak, and I'm recording this from our studios in Valley Cottage, New York. We have a special guest from DraftCountdown.com, Shane Hallam. Shane, how you doing?
I'm good. I'm good. Thanks for having me. Always, it's draft season, so it's always fun to talk draft. We're getting down to it here.
We are. And where are you located?
I'm in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, born, raised, and living. So I'm a Steelers guy, but covering it all.
Okay, so you remember that game when we missed the field goal, right?
I do. I do. There's been a couple lucky breaks for the Steelers over the years. I'll take them.
Right. All right, let's get right into it. Then I want to discuss your website in a few minutes, but I want to ask you your rankings. The Jets, their needs to me, Shane, and everybody's talking about this, that, whatever. We haven't had an edge pass rusher since John Abraham. The Jet Twitter crowd, they fall in love with different players. A few months ago, it was Tyler Lindenbaum, and now it's Sauce Gardner. I don't know as much as the upper echelon of these football coaches, whatever, but from what I observed being a Jet fan all these years, Robert Saleh's defense to me, Shane, is predicated on having a top-notch pass rush, and I feel he thinks he could get away with average or just a little above average cornerbacks. So I don't know how well you know the Jets, but with that said, you could comment on that. But I want your top three edge pass rushers.
I actually agree with you. I think as good as Sauce Gardner is, I don't think the Jets are going to take him where they're at. You'd have to take him at 4. And I'm with you. I think for this defense, edge rusher is much more important to have two good guys coming off of each edge. And this is such a strong class to me. Like you'd be dumb to pass up one of these edge rushers in the top 10. My top 3 personally, I have Kayvon Thibodeau, the edge rusher out of Oregon, as my number 1 player in this class. And I know he's kind of fallen out of favor for whatever reason in the NFL, that maybe he, isn't as focused on football, but man, I mean, his electric first step, the best in the draft, I think by far. He just, gets around that edge so quickly, and you just see him kind of tenaciously plays really smart. He knows, what the offense is doing. I think that's really underrated in his game. So he's my number 1. I have Aiden Hutchinson from Michigan as my number 2 edge rusher, probably going to go number 1 overall to the Jaguars. That game against Ohio State kind of vaulted him up, but a really good athlete with good size. Then number 3, I have Trayvon Walker, the edge rusher from Georgia, who had probably the best player on the field in the national championship game. He only has 1 year of starting experience. That's kind of the knock on him. But when you get a guy that's 272 pounds that moves the way that he does and had the production this year, had the pressures, everything's like he's playing for the best defense and he's the one that's making the plays. I think that's usually a good indicator, and I think he's going to be a really good NFL player.
A couple of things, that Georgia defense was a dynamic defense this year. The whole team was. And I know that some of the statistics for one guy will eat up statistics from another guy. With that said, though, I just have a feeling, and one or actually both my co-hosts are not crazy about Trayvon Walker. Maybe you could try to convince me, because to me, he's more like Vernon Golston than he is Willie McGinst. He seems to me like he's a workout warrior that has all this potential, but I just haven't seen the production as far as the statistics on the field. So go into him in a little more depth.
Well, I think that is the big question, right? It's why a lot of people are not super comfortable with him when you have kind of 1 year of production. That's a question mark. Is it him? Is it the people around him? I think what he kind of brings to the table more than some of the other pass rushers beneath him is that, he has the size and athleticism, one of the best athletes at this position. So you're going to see that come into play. He has he's really good at playing low, he can use his strength, but he also has that athleticism to get around the edge. He has a nice spin move. He has a nice swim. He does a lot of different things. So I think sometimes you watch, when you watch a guy like Vernon Golston, he knew he was more athletic and that he would just use that athleticism every time. I don't think Trayvon Walker does that. I think he uses some strength. He uses some pass rush moves. He's not kind of a one-trick pony. I compared him to as a prospect comp to Ziggy Ansah from BYU a couple years ago that did really well with the Lions. Took a little bit of time to get up to speed. I think it'll take Walker a little bit to kind of fill in, but I do think he's going to be one of those players that finds that production.
Okay, and what about Jermaine Johnson, the second? I mean, a lot of indications are that he might end up with the Jets either at 4 or at 10. What's your feeling about him? He had one super year, and he really, everybody knows he lit it up in the combine, there in practices. So what's your feeling on him?
I think if you watch this season from him, it is one of the best in terms of producing. And that Florida State defense wasn't great, and he was by far the best player. He was making plays often on an island. Yeah, even when teams try to put a running back there to chip him or a tight end and double team him a little bit, I mean, he was still breaking those double teams. I think that's the most exciting part. I was a little worried about the combine. He came in and played and did really, really well and showcased that he can do that. My big question with him is he is a little bit lighter, which I think can fit the Jets defense well. I think Jermaine Johnson, and it's a tough thing as a draft guy ranking these prospects because different defenses want different types of talent. I think Jermaine Johnson's a great fit for Robert Saleh's defense, but he's not going to be a great fit for the Seattle Seahawks, or someone like that. So I think that's where you want him kind of standing up, using that explosion off the snap to the best of his ability. And I think that's where he works the best. So I actually think it would be a good pick for them. Even if it's at 4, I wouldn't disagree with that pick, even if it's over someone I have ranked higher.
All right. So if you're Joe Douglas, and let's say they're both available at either 4 or 10, all right, let's say it's interchangeable at this point. I happen to think, and Ralph Schrager, who's one of my co-hosts, we kind of think that for like 20 to 30 spots, the talent is fairly level. And we kind of want the Jets to trade back. But my feeling is, a lot of teams want to trade back. They feel the same way. And part of the problem is it's not a super quarterback year, but I'll get back into that in a second. But if you're Joe Douglas at 4 or 10, doesn't matter. Jermaine Johnson, the second's available, and George Karlaftis is available. Who would you take?
So I have Karlaftis ranked one spot higher, but like I said before, I think for the Jets defense, I would rather have Jermaine Johnson. I think Karlaftis, I would rather have him be in a more traditional 4-3 set or wide 9 set. I think Johnson's going to work coming off that edge as, and I think he brings a little bit more in terms of Karlaftis has a versatile skill set against the run. I think Jermaine Johnson's going to be your better pass rusher. And so I think to me, I would take Jermaine Johnson, especially at 10 if he's sitting there. Right.
And as you know, they have Carl Lawson coming back, but we can't really count on him coming off the Achilles because, he depends a lot on pushing off. Boye Mafe, he seemed to really be the flavor of the month for a while. What's your feeling about him?
When you watch Boye Mafe, you see just the length, the size, like he looks like a great NFL pass rusher. If you could just build the guy that you want, he would look like Boye Mafe. I think the big problem that I have with him, why I don't have him quite as a first round pick, is he still is trying to catch up mentally, and he's not a young prospect. So that's always a concern for me. If he doesn't quite get the game yet, he's not good at reading what the offensive lineman's going to do and adjusting what he does. I think that's an important part of being a pass rusher. You have to know the guy you're going up against. If he likes to play wide, that you can counter inside. Mafe doesn't do that. He's kind of what we talked about before, the downside of Vernon Golston. Like, this is the guy that just tries to use those long arms, that athletic ability. Sometimes it works, and oftentimes it doesn't. I think he's just high upside, but I would be more comfortable with him in the early second than, say, the late first round.
Ralph Schrager, again, I mentioned him, my co-host. He's very good with the draft, going back 30, 40, 50 years. In fact, he should have been doing what you're doing. But of course, they didn't. We used to go down to the draft in New York City every year.
Oh yeah.
It was a treat. Before it was a big thing where we used to eat the buffet with the press. It was neat. And there were names there that I'm sure you heard of, but before your time, Howard Cosell and Pete Rozelle were there and all that stuff. Paul Zimmerman, these
Oh yeah.
classic guys too. But anyway, Ralph was, he's a film buff, and he called me up this week. He says, Marty, I've been reviewing more and more the film of this guy at San Diego State. He says, I really like his technique. Cameron Thomas. Did you go into any depth with him? Is there anything you could tell us, or Jet fans, or Ralph, about Cameron Thomas?
I like Cameron Thomas. I think he's really intriguing as a player. Someone we didn't get a full workout from, but what we got in terms of the agility drills, the explosion drills, was pretty good. I'm with Ralph. I think technique wise, he's someone that really is really good at stacking and shedding blockers. He's good at kind of setting them up and getting around them, right? If you can square a guy up with you, it's really easy to get around them, and that's when he gets a lot of his sacks. But he is very agile in space. I don't think he's going to be this high end, chase down a running back type athlete. But if you're looking in round 3 to round 4, I think there is some upside with him from an athletic standpoint and from kind of a physical standpoint. Just very inconsistent. I think there's some games where he kind of disappears and some games where he's kind of dominant. And so, hey, which guy am I getting? That's always a tough evaluation.
Right. By the way, Jets Rewind fan, we're talking to Shane Hallam from draftcountdown.com. I'm telling you, you got to go to this site. It's not only is it full of content, but it's just so easy to navigate for if you're not like, if you're computer challenged like me, you'd love it. Okay, let's just get in briefly into the quarterbacks. The Jets have their quarterback, hopefully. We don't know for sure. We'll know at the end of this year. But the quarterback situation doesn't affect the Jets, though it does affect the Jets. So in a weak quarterback year, I want to ask you, who do you think would go in the first round, and how many quarterbacks do you think would go in the top 10?
It's kind of $1 million question right now, because to me, I don't think any of these quarterbacks should go in the top 10. Like, I don't think anyone should. Now, will they? I feel like someone's going to. I think Carolina is going to be a team at 6 that, like you talked about, the Jets is going to want to trade down. The question is someone actually going to want to move up. But I could see them taking Kenny Pickett out of Pittsburgh at 6 overall. Was recruited to Temple by Matt Rule, and he knows him pretty well, and they seem very, very interested. But I think that's probably it. I mean, I just don't think you're going to see a team want to move up for any of these players. None are polished. None kind of have it. I think in the first round, we'll see Pickett. I think we'll absolutely see Malik Willis from Liberty and his athletic upside and big arm go at some point. And then I think we could see 2 more on the back end. I think Matt Corral from Mississippi offers some athletic upside with a quick release kind of RPO style. And Desmond Ridder from Cincinnati is really intriguing. One of the better athletes at this position that we've seen, did a full workout, obviously took Cincinnati to 2 undefeated regular seasons. He has some accuracy issues. I think it's a problem, but I think he's going to be one of those players that a lot of NFL GMs really like.
Okay, and I'm just wondering, because there's a rumor keeps popping up, because they coached his team in the Senior Bowl. Is there any chance, in your mind, Malik Willis goes with the second pick to Detroit?
I'll never say there's no chance in the NFL draft. I learned that lesson long ago. Right. Never say it's not going to happen, but I would be pretty floored to see them take Malik Willis at 2. I think they've shown last year they're comfortable just, playing this out, building the team and getting the quarterback later. And why reach now when you didn't reach last year? That's my thing. Why are they going to reach for quarterback this year? They're still going to start Jared Goff for a year anyway. So unless they like heads over heels have loved Malik Willis from a lot of what they've brought in terms of visits and things, I don't think that they're going to draft him at 2. But, they could move around. They could move up from 32 if they really like him. I think there's other shots to get him.
Right. Okay. I want to just go back to the edge, and we're going to move on. We're going to spend a lot of time on wide receivers because that's a big need for the Jets. Unfortunately, I lost my screen, but okay. Ohabo from Michigan got hurt, which was a shame. The Jets have two first round picks, two second round picks. In the second round, I believe they pick 35 and 38. Would you roll the dice? Well, let's say pick 38 with David Ojabo with the Jets.
I think if he's sitting there and they haven't taken an edge rusher, I absolutely would take him at 38. I would even be comfortable for a good team at 30, 31, 32 to take him. I think as long as you don't need that contribution right off the bat. I mean, it's unlikely. I think that he'll probably end up on the PUP list, maybe get back mid-season, but he's one of those players from a pass rush perspective that just is very, very good. And oftentimes, you watch that Ohio State game, you could see Ohio State putting more on his side. They really wanted to double team him more than Aiden Hutchinson. It bit them, but that's ultimately what they wanted to do. They put Jeremy Rucker at the tight end over there. So I think a lot of people were more scared of his pass rush ability. Now he's not someone that sets the edge very well against the run, and kind of struggled in the mental side on that. But I think when you're talking early second round, if he comes back and 100% healthy, I mean, like you talked about before, this game is about getting to the quarterback, and that's something David Ojabo can do really well, really, really well.
Right. I want to ask you just to go back a year, and then I want to talk about the draft countdown for just a minute and get your background before we get into the wide receivers. Just so you know, I'm going to prep you too, that at the end, I'm going to ask you for 2 or 3 sleepers. So keep that in mind. But last year, how did you have him ranked as far as Zach Wilson, and what's your feelings about him?
I was a little skeptical. I mean, I probably would not have taken him second overall. I think I had him as the 4th quarterback in this draft. I had him rated as a kind of a mid-first round pick. And I think the tool set was absolutely there. I mean, when you watched him, there's some downfield passes and the downfield accuracy and ball placement. I mean, things that you don't see prospects, and even guys I'd rated above him, like Trey Lance, be able to do. I think my fear was under pressure, that he really struggled at BYU. It didn't happen often, but when it did, I thought he kind of panicked. And that's always an issue, because you're going to get pressure in the NFL. There's no offensive line where that's not going to happen. And I thought last year, I didn't watch every game, but I thought last year, a rough beginning. But I thought when he came back from the injury, really started to show some promise. And I think if the Jets really build around him, I do think there's still potential there. But I was definitely one of the skeptics, one of the many skeptics of them taking him as high as they did.
Yeah, I kind of went 180 degrees. Like the middle of the year, I just said this guy will never be a good quarterback. They should move on. But just like you said, Shane, when he came back from the injury, the last 4 or 5 games, not that he lit it up. If you watched him, he just had a comfort back there in the pocket. He was different. So I really have a lot of hope for him. And we're going to talk about wide receiver. And part of the problem is, I mean, he was throwing to guys like Jeff Smith and Ryan Griffin. And to me, it's such a huge problem. But I want you to tell the Jets Rewind fans, because I'd like the Jets Rewind fans, I want them to go to Draft Countdown, not just between now and the draft, but even past that, because you guys have projections. So tell us a little bit about yourself and Draft Countdown, and then we'll get into the wide receivers.
Absolutely. I've been covering the draft since 2004. So this is year 18 for me covering the NFL draft. I've kind of bopped around the internet early, but I actually worked for Scott Wright at Draft Countdown for a long time in the mid to late 2000s. One of the first NFL draft websites on the internet started in 1996. So we've been around for a while, but Scott, who owned the site before, moved on. So Brian Basarge and myself have taken over as managing partners, turned into, a legitimate LLC business. And, we're just trying to rebuild the brand and rebuild the content there. So something that I've been trying to do that's had some success is like you said, kind of project in the future. Not only do we have 2022 content, but I have rankings for 2023 and a mock draft there, which will be updated after this draft. 2024, the guys that I watched as freshmen are in high school, projecting them, and things will widely change. But I think it's nice sometimes to get some of those names and start to know even if you don't watch college football, who are some guys I need to check out? Who do I need to start watching? So that's what we try to do. We have rankings. We have a podcast, Draft Countdown podcast, if you want to check that out. We'll be live streaming all 3 days of the draft, every pick. Sometimes those national coverages, the third day, they start not talking about guys. We'll talk about everybody and break it down. So we're excited for that too.
That's great. Okay, let's get to wide receivers. As I mentioned, I went crazy when he started looking good. He had no one to throw to. I mean, the only one really had to throw to was Braxton Berrios, where he made some great catches and Zach really made some nice throws. The Jets need wide receivers, okay? Denzel Mims is a huge question mark. We keep getting reports that he dropped his body fat from like 10% to like 6.5%. He looks like he's chiseled. I just don't think you could count on this guy from what I've seen. I would like the Jets in their first 5 picks to take 2 wide receivers. That's my feeling. I want to ask you, I just want to start with your second-rated receiver because I had liked Traylon Burks, and I was amazed. I watched that whole Alabama game, and they could not cover that guy. My co-hosts think that he's limited. He just runs go patterns. He takes plays off when he blocks. Tell me what it is you like about Traylon Burks.
I think Traylon Burks is more athletic than he tested. And I think when you watch the versatility that he brought to the table, because I think he did more than 9 routes. I mean, he played about 43% of the snaps out of the slot. He kind of played this big slot role and did a lot of posts, did a lot of out routes from the slot, a lot of different things. But yeah, when you have a guy that's as big as he is at 6'2", 225 that runs in the mid 4.5s, you can get down the field against safeties that can't run that fast. So they absolutely utilize that. I don't think that's a problem to me. So I think he's more athletic than people think. I think one of the issues and one of the questions I have is just here's a big body guy that you're probably not going to want to put in the slot. You're going to put Braxton Berrios in the slot. What can he play outside? Can he be consistent? I think when he was out there, he played well. He's a good contested catcher. He doesn't always get consistent separation, but I think there's some technique issues and some things that can come for his agility. So I think he's going to be better than a lot of people think. And 10 might be a little bit rich, but I think if they take him there, I wouldn't really bat an eye.
And again, I jump around, forgive me though, but you said a few things and it brings up some questions. One is Elijah Moore. Do you feel Elijah Moore could be a number 1 receiver?
I think he can be a number 1 receiver in the modern NFL, right? So I think if we go back 20 years, no. But I think in today's NFL, you don't need a guy to be the big outside presence. I think Elijah Moore, what he showed, like a Deontay Johnson in Pittsburgh, he's a guy, Elijah Moore just gets open off the snap with that quickness and agility and speed. So is he going to, go down the field and make these big plays? Maybe not. But I think you can use him to move the chains, do a lot of short yardage things. He's really good after the catch. I mean, I think he can be essentially your number 1 receiver, as long as you have someone like a Traylon Burks, or probably what they wanted Denzel Mims to be, that outside guy that could take a little bit of pressure off and force the safety to play over there.
Okay, let's get into your rankings. You have Garrett Wilson ranked number 1. Why do you have him number 1? And why is he number 1 instead of, let's say, Jameson Williams? Is it just the injury?
I think the injury plays a part. I think both of them have some similar profiles, because I think Jameson Williams from Alabama has a little more of that deep speed. If you want someone that can stretch the field, I think he can do that. Garrett Wilson, to me, is a little bit better in terms of body control and off the snap. I think he's someone that gets open really quickly, can kind of use his feet to get open. And you saw a lot of poorly thrown passes on the sideline to Garrett Wilson. He's able to adjust and make those catches. I think Jameson Williams is very good, but he kind of took what was there and did really well with it. So I like Jameson Williams a little more after the catch, but I think Garrett Wilson has the ability to be a 100-catch receiver. I think Jameson Williams will be a big help to teams, but I'm just not sure he's going to be a volume type receiver that's going to always be able to get separation in the short and medium range.
Okay, I just want to go back a little bit. Again, I'm jumping around, but do you think a guy like Garrett Wilson gets past, let's say, the Atlanta Falcons at 8? And if he does, who do you think the Falcons are going to take at 8?
I think he does. I think it's possible, but that they take him. But I think ultimately for Atlanta, they're going to pick the best player available, and I just don't think it's going to be Wilson there. I think they could take a pass rusher. I think if one of the guys that we talked about, one of the top 4, if Jermaine Johnson falls or Kayvon Thibodeau falls, I think they would take him. I think Kyle Hamilton, the safety out of Notre Dame, is a real possibility as they move Richie Grant, who they drafted last year, into kind of a slot corner role. So I think they could probably go defense would be my guess ultimately.
And all right, let's get into Drake London. You have him rated pretty high. Again, one of my co-hosts calls him an undersized tight end, and that doesn't run great routes, doesn't really get separation. Everybody knows about his contested catch success, but tell me what your take is on Drake London, and is it a red flag that he keeps delaying his pro day?
I mean, I think it is a red flag. I think that ankle injury is much worse, perhaps, than we think. So I think we'll ultimately know by where he goes in the draft. If he falls, into the second round or something, we'll be like, yeah, there's a medical red flag there that we're not going to know about. I like him. I think the production early in the year, he did get separation. I don't think it's the same way that a Garrett Wilson or an Elijah Moore gets separation, but I think what Drake London does, if you try to press him off the snap, he's really good at beating that press, swimming past the corner, and he can beat him deep like Mike Evans does. I think he has some of that in him where you're rarely going to see clean plays where he's 10 yards down the field. But if you have a quarterback that can put the ball in a good spot, I mean, Drake London's going to get a little bit of a cushion. Long arms, very physical, and I think he's a player after the catch that does a lot more. Usually those bigger guys, you say, well, they're going to catch the ball, but they can't run very fast. They're going to get run down. I don't think he does that. I mean, he can get physical and he can move in short space. I'd love to see the pro day. I hope it happens. I think it will be very telling.
We'll see. It's funny, Shane, sometimes I see players and things bother me about them that have nothing to do with what type of play they are. I saw a play with Drake London where the opposing defender pulled off his helmet and he stood there staring at him and he stuck out his tongue, which means nothing, but I don't know why he did that. But okay, with that said, the stuff he does or he did in college, you think he'll be able to do a lot of that as a professional receiver?
I think he can. I do think London is a little more scheme dependent. I think you do want a scheme that's going to allow him to play on that boundary and give him the ability to make those catches and use that length. I think if you try to kind of move him around too much, or you ask him to do some of these kind of fakes off the line, I don't think that's going to be his game. So I hope the team that picks him knows how to use him essentially.
Okay, let's get to Chris Olave. One of my co-hosts, Ray Clifford, is in Marysville, Ohio. He watches every single Ohio State game. He loves this guy. I have become a big fan. I thought last year he should have come out. I don't know what his agent was thinking. And I actually think last year he might have went higher. I know that he goes down pretty easily after the catch, but what's your assessment of Chris Olave? And tell me about his catch radius.
Really smooth athlete. I think that's when you watch Chris Olave kind of glides around the field and he change of direction. You just don't even see him change direction. And that's how he wins. He can go deep. He has that kind of speed. I think he has a pretty good catch radius for a player that's, 6 foot tall. He is someone that adjusts to passes, and you can see him kind of read the ball as it's coming in. He's really good at tracking the football and knowing what he has to do with his body to make that catch. like you said, I think my big fear is after the catch, contact, he's down. And so if he doesn't get that clean separation down the field, I just don't think there's a ton you're going to do. He's not a player I would want to throw a screen pass to, or, try to use him in that way. I think he's going to go higher than I have him. I think a team like the Jets or Washington at 11 could be really interested in a player with this kind of production. I also have some fear that, he was the third best receiver on Ohio State's team last year. And that's never a good thing. As good as Ohio State was, like, I don't know if production going down is ever a good thing.
Right. Okay. Christian Watson, who was North Dakota State, and not that it's a big knock, but everybody talks about the competition he played against. He had a very good week at the Senior Bowl. You give some great Senior Bowl coverage, by the way. I was very impressed. Give me your take on Christian Watson.
I'm a really, really big fan. Like he's one of my guys. I have an article from early January before the Senior Bowl where I talked about where I think his career trajectory is going to be similar to Cooper Kupp. They're very different players, but I think Christian Watson is going to be a player like year one, have some production, kind of get caught up to speed, and then just, from there, I think sky's the limit. Because I'll be honest, in terms of the level of competition, I would almost take what he faced over, say, Skye Moore in Western Michigan, some of those MAC teams. I think, the high end of the FCS is pretty darn good. And Watson, big, 6'4", 208, an elite athlete. He was kind of a late bloomer in high school. It's why he didn't get recruited to big schools. He wasn't this big or this fast yet. And he kind of got there. And the Senior Bowl really sold me that he could be a number one receiver because he was open every single rep, every single play. His route running was so much better than what they did with him at North Dakota State. The fear there is production. He wasn't super productive at that level. And so you have some fear, but when you see him running reverses and they're using him in these different ways and he's running away from guys, I just think he's so much untapped potential that an NFL team could really unlock.
All right. George Pickens, his injury scares me because I happen to think whenever you're a Jet coach or Jet general manager, history dictates that there's always a time clock going. So that's why I think they would take a Garrett Wilson ahead of a Jameson Williams. They want a guy that could produce yesterday. Okay. Now, with that said, George Pickens, if they take Garrett Wilson at 10, George Pickens is open at 35. And let's say they have slotted at 38 an offensive lineman. Do you think if you were Joe Douglas, that's something you would look at?
I think I would. I don't think it'd be a bad thing if you get a Garrett Wilson that can contribute right away.
Would he last? But would he last at 35? That's another question.
It's going to be close. Like it wouldn't surprise me if Kansas City or someone late in the first just pulls the trigger, or Detroit in round 2. So I think it's going to be a little bit tenuous to get a George Pickens there because the upside. If you told me George Pickens is a top 10 receiver in the NFL in 3 years, I could see it happening. If you told me he was out of the league in 3 years, I could see it happening too. I think that's what you bring to the table. Someone who great contested catcher, great leaper, and even coming back from the injury, had that big catch in the national championship game. But I also go back to last year. I see plays where he just gives up, where he just doesn't run a route. One play against Cincinnati sticks in my mind at the goal line. They were throwing a fade to him. He was the only receiver. He just stood at the line. He didn't do anything. They just threw the ball. So like those kind of things, like you said, get caught in your head. So right. I like him. I think the talent's there. Maybe he's matured, but there are some questions I think with effort as well.
Right. Because Shane, if I'm GM, you have no idea how it killed me about the receivers not getting separation last year. And everything that bothered me about Zach Wilson not getting separation. And then we play these teams and these receivers are open like we're playing with 9 guys on defense. It just drives me crazy. If you're a Jet fan, you get used to these things. And as a Jet fan, what happens when you're a Jet fan, Shane, is at the end of September, you start looking for the draft. It's unbelievable. And I'm just so tired of that, All right. Anyway, the next player, Jahan Dotson, he ran a slower 40 than expected. I love this guy. I thought his catch radius was great. And when I brought it up, I had some Jet fans say to me, well, you don't want him because you don't want to get the same type of player as Elijah Moore. But then I said, well, what's wrong with having two Elijah Moores? But he's not as fast as Elijah Moore. But give me your take on Jahan Dotson and his catch radius, which I loved.
I mean, there are some plays where the ball is way above his head, and for a guy that's under 5'11", I mean, he can really get up there and get it. I think he is a better athlete than his combine and profile was. Super productive. Often Penn State quarterback Sean Clifford not very good, and Jahan Dotson bailed him out a lot. And so when I see that, I say, okay, here's a player that could step into a situation where maybe you have a quarterback developing or that's going to throw some balls that aren't exactly right. And I think Jahan Dotson can make those plays. He's fast after the catch. He's not, he breaks tackles with his agility, with kind of his skill set in terms of, shaking guys off. He has a good juke. He has a good stutter move. That's how he kind of wins. So I think could be a possibility to get, hey, kind of a second player similar to Elijah Moore that you can move around the field. I do think Jahan Dotson, I actually like him off the snap a little better than I liked Elijah Moore in terms of outside receivers. I think he plays a little more physical off the snap. So there is some possibility to use them both on the field in different roles too.
Right. Even though they lost out to the receiver from Kansas City to Miami, the one thing I see is that I think Joe Douglas wants to go for one really tall receiver because he was all in on Mike Williams. I remember when they wouldn't let him go. So that's the one thing that he might go for a play like Christian Watson. He could go for Drake London. All right. Skye Moore, he is zooming up the chart, Shane, from what I see. I mean, I don't know if you see the same momentum, but he's really getting a lot of ink. What's your take on him?
I think he's a good player. I think he was that offense and is a really good route runner, can get down the field well. My questions with Skye Moore is just in terms of he has the pure speed, but he's shorter than a Jahan Dotson. I think he's a little more specialized. He doesn't quite have that catch radius. I think you're going to use him mostly on kind of 9 routes or posts. You want him deep down the field, using his footwork to his advantage. So he gets separation, but some of the more challenging games last year, he got hurt in both of them against Michigan. Like when you want to see him produce, he got hurt and didn't produce. And I think that's tough. We really didn't get to see him play NFL competition when he had the shot. So I definitely have some fear of translation, especially early. If he's a late first round pick or something, I think it'd be too high.
Right. As we enter the fourth quarter, we're talking to Steve Hallam, who is one of the managing partners of DraftCountdown.com. I urge all NFL fans and all Jet fans, you have to check it out. These guys know exactly what they're doing. All right, now let's one more player, the one receiver no one talks about, David Bell. What's your take on him? All he seems to do is produce, but why is he getting no pub?
I mean, the workouts were really, really bad.
Okay.
it just couldn't get much worse for him, running a 4.65. And look, you come run a 4.65 and be a good receiver, but his the rest of it, the vertical, the broad jump, the shuttle, the 3-cone, they're all awful. So the shuttle was in the bottom 7% of receivers ever. So to me, there's some athletic problems. And when you watch him on film, he is really good. We talk about Drake London at contested catches. I mean, he knows how to go up and get it, and that's what he's good at. But I mean, the separation isn't there in college and the Big Ten, and even against smaller schools, he's not someone that gets open. And I just feel like in the NFL, man, that's going to be a problem. I think if there's one player that we've talked about that could fall to day 3, I think it's David Bell. Wouldn't surprise me if he is more the 20th receiver off the board than 10th where I have him.
Okay, now we're going to have to close this out in a couple of minutes. The clock is our enemy. Steve Hallam we're talking to, the Jets. I look at it a little different. When I think of the Jets, the last couple of years, their 2 biggest problems were injuries. They had the highest percentage of their cap on the injured reserve the last 2 years, which is unbelievable to me. And I thought they should do some sort of investigation on the turf and just really rip it down and figure out what to do. The other thing that really bothered me was their kicking. I mean, I know they signed Zerlin and they had another guy from last year too. But I want to ask you about one player. I don't know if you followed him. I looked into this guy. I really like him. He's from LSU. His name's Cade York. He's a kicker. Because last year I was lobbying for the Jets to take McPherson, and he was picked up by the Bengals. And that guy looks like he's going to be like a 10, 15-year player for them. Do you have any information on Cade York?
Yeah, I actually have him rated pretty similarly to Evan McPherson last year. I think Cade York has that same type of potential. A really good leg. From all accounts, very confident player. I think in terms of headspace, from everything I've heard, that he is, really confident. Doesn't let bad kicks get to him. Sometimes that's 75% of the battle in the NFL. If you have a good kicking leg. But I think he's a really, really good kicker. I think fifth, sixth round, he could be a possibility. And like you said, sit there for a decade. Now, maybe with Greg Zuerlein, I think Greg Zuerlein still has some juice. Maybe the Jets won't need one, but I've been mocking Cade York to them for so long. I might have to keep doing it.
Oh, to who?
To the Jets.
Yeah, you really have? I didn't even know that.
That's been common. My 7-round mock draft, I think, for months. So
I didn't know that. I've been promoting him for like 2 months. I didn't even know you do. That's great. I mean, they have him and they have this other guy, Pinheiro, that they signed. But Pinheiro was perfect, but it's such a small sample size. And we just get killed with the kicking game. And you know what else we get killed with? Last year, we lost to Tampa Bay because we let a receiver get behind Elijah Riley, a safety. 2 years ago, we lost to the Raiders because we let a receiver get behind Lamar. What's his name? The same name as the quarterback. Who's the quarterback for Baltimore? Lamar Jackson. He was so that's 2 games. And I said at one point, if somebody could convince me, get me in a room and say, Marty, if you draft Kyle Hamilton, no receiver will get by your secondary the last minute of the game. Quickly, what's your take on Kyle Hamilton?
I think he's exceptional. I know some people were a little afraid his pro day wasn't as good, but all of Notre Dame, it was pretty bad. I mean, you watch Kyle Hamilton, you see a lot of range. He's one of those guys. I hope whoever drafts him uses him like Troy Polamalu, because he's so big, can play him against the line. He can hit you hard, but he's also a player that has great instincts and just knows where the ball's going, makes big interceptions. I think if he falls in the draft, if he falls outside the top 10, I think a team's going to get an absolute steal.
Okay, quickly, give me 2 sleepers that no one's talking about.
One of my big running back sleepers that I love is Pierre Strong Jr. out of South Dakota State. I think he could be similar to Michael Carter, who the Jets drafted last year. Okay. Strong's really explosive, good pass catcher, good blocker. I think he's someone from a smaller school that people don't talk about enough. And then if you want kind of a later corner, like you said, if you wait on that, Zion McCollum from Sam Houston State, 6'2", 200 pounds, physical at the line of scrimmage. One of the best athletes I've seen at the position, and backs it up. I think he's a really intriguing round 3, round 4 prospect too.
You have a thumbs up or thumbs down on Stingley, the defensive, the quarterback. What do you think?
Thumbs up to me, but you got to be a little weary these past 2 seasons and the injuries for sure.
Okay. Shane Hallam, where would they find you? Could they follow you on Twitter?
Yeah. Check me out on Twitter at Shane P. Hallam, and then always go to draftcountdown.com. You can get all the content there, and the podcast, the Draft Countdown, wherever you get your podcasts.
Shane, I want to thank you for coming on to Jets Rewind, all the fans. And fans, you have to check out this draftcountdown.com. It's terrific. He's got everything organized, so easy to go through. So we're a couple of weeks away to the draft. So thanks again for coming on, and we're going to close it out right now.